Alrighty. Ladies and gentlemen, how are you doing? It is John the Ninja. I'm excited. Let me tell you, I woke up this morning, I brushed my teeth, I took a shower, and then after I went to work, I knew I was going to be talking to this gentleman. So what did I do? I went back into the bathroom, I brushed my teeth, I took a shower, I somewhat did my hair this time. But guys, I am super excited. The guest I am speaking to not only has made a name for himself as a comedian and has survived over 4 decades. Think about that. 4 decades of comedy. But his story of redemption is just, it's beyond epic. It's one of those ones you read in a fictional tale, but this one happens to be real. It is widely known that making a living in comedy, let alone staying relevant, is very difficult. But being a clean comic is super difficult, which makes this man's story just as amazing. This man's name, who I'm speaking with, is Mr. Jeff Allen. Jeff started comedy in 1978 on Thanksgiving Day. And even though his first attempt at it was very, we could say, it's demoralizing, a little hard of a pill to swallow, he went through, he struggled, and then he finally found his niche. And then after he found his niche, due to other events, switched to clean comedy and fought through and fought through, and now is one of the most successful clean comics and Christian comics. Double whammy for you guys. His accolades include appearances on Access Television, HBO, Comedy Central's Premium Blend, VH1 stand-up special. He's been featured on the Grand Ole Opry, the U.S. Comedy Arts Festival in Aspen, and the Montreal Just for Laughs International Comedy Festival. He's even done the late night show with a few other acts. And I got to tell you guys, he has so many specials, but the one I always love, the one I always go to, Happy Wife, Happy Life. You think you know it until you hear this guy explain it. He's come from the bottom, having to scratch to get to the top, and has amassed over 100 million views on social media. Ladies and gentlemen, the man who survived it all, and the man who's about to embark on the America I Grew Up tour starting in Fort Worth, Texas, June 29th. Guys, I give you Jeff Allen. Sir, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. I'm so glad you decided to interview me. I got out of yard work, so anytime I can get out of doing yard work, I'm a happy man. Feel bad because I haven't shaved and probably got weeds in my hair. I was out whacking the weeds. I'm not a gifted weed whacker. I've busted windows out with flying debris, and I'm grateful that you asked me to do this.
I'm so grateful that you given me the time, sir. Me and your manager went back and forth and just a couple things, and I was just like, wow, if I could just get it, but it turned out perfect. Also, I want to mention happy birthday, belated.
Yeah, 64, man, and I got another year before Medicare. So There was a time I didn't think I'd make it to Medicare, but and, I still may not. The Lord may call me home, but I hope not.
God forbid it's anytime soon, but at least you know you're going home. Sir, I know you used to live in Jersey. I'm from Jersey too. I was wondering, where in Jersey did you live?
Two places, Belmead, which was probably 15, 20 minutes from Princeton, and then Basking Ridge. We rented houses when we lived there. Matter of fact, our babysitter was a Princeton student, and years later, probably, oh my gosh, this was back in 87, 88, somewhere around there. She just reached out to us through Facebook. She used to watch our kids when they were little, and now my kids have kids of their own. And, Facebook has a plus side to it and an upside. So
that's really cool too. I used to live in Clifton way when I was much younger.
Nice. Beautiful state. Jersey takes a lot of heat because of Newark, but it's called the Garden State for a reason. I mean, it has some upside.
It is pretty. So just want to go over 40 plus years it's got to be. You started,
yeah, 42. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And everybody knows the story that has done their research. Your brother first introduced you to it. You were working at a jewelry shop, and then you guys go, there's an opening act, there's comedians opening for his band, and then you go to the comedy club, and then finally Thanksgiving you get the courage to go do it yourself.
Right.
You bomb, and then you're like,
that's a polite word. Yeah, and it was a little humiliating.
But you go back for it. And then I was just curious, because I don't know who the comic was, but you were grinding for at least 2 years. And it didn't seem like you were getting anywhere before you saw a comic with a notebook and you was writing down your spiel. What was the revelation when you figured that out? It's like, okay, how do I start developing my act? Because I know you also did magic. which I'm curious how
I
that.
did when I got out of college. Yeah, I was in college briefly. Apparently you have to show up to class and do the work. I did not know that. So anyway, it wasn't quite 2 years, but it was a long time before I saw some guy writing in a notebook. It was months, and it started to make sense at least. But I had one routine that's still with me. It's on the old VW Bug,
Ah,
and I came running through the door one night after it broke down again. I used to have to park it on a hill so that I could run it down the hill, get in and pop the clutch so the car would start. Anyway, I was late again for a show and I ran through the door just in time to hit the stage, and I spewed out all of this stuff about the VW Bug and people were laughing. And I kind of went, "Oh, wow, this works." Angst, yelling, screaming, and complaining. It was my nature anyway. So then I found a vein of comedy that I can at least get into, and it was complaining about things, and then being able to write down and make notes. And you'll watch guys work that talk to the audience and ask questions and stuff, and people think, "Wow, they're off the cuff, they're really brilliant." But if you do it long enough, you'll get the same answers to, what do you do for a living? There's only so many occupations. And you make a mental note, you'll remember, and then all of a sudden it isn't so much off the cuff, but it's just stuff that you've accumulated over the years.
so I remember you saying that was like one of your first big laughs when you're talking with your wife. And one of the other jokes I thought was just hilarious was when you talk about your sons, teenagers are God's punishment to us.
Mankind,
How
right?
old was Satan when he rejected God, a teen? I was wondering what inspired that joke. Like, were you just like off the cuff, like, oh, these kids are really starting to get on my nerves, or was it something like, how do I incorporate, religion into it? How did you formulate that joke?
I'm always trying to figure out ways to do faith in a secular environment. When I was working in Vegas, I would have pastors, reach out to me on Facebook and send me messages that said, we didn't know you were a believer, but after watching your show, we went back and did a little research. And I don't know where that one particularly came from. Boy, it's been so long. Again, things pop out in the course of conversation, and I'll make a note. The story developed. I even added a line on it years later about the 16. I didn't know how the devil was when he rejected God's authority. If my guess, 16. And then I've added the devil got his driver's license and drove to Georgia. That's all I know. And it's amazing how many people remember that song.
Love that punchline. You said that your top three comedians were Bill Cosby, Dennis Wolfberg, and Brian Regan, or Reagan, if I spelled his name wrong. What do you feel you took from them and incorporated in your act? Or what about them inspired you?
Cosby and Carlin both. I would throw Carlin in there as well. And I'm listening now because I've been home so long. I bought George Carlin's life work. It's a stack of DVDs. It's absolutely amazing. As brilliant as I thought he was, multiply that by 10. He is the quintessential wordsmith. So probably Cosby and Carlin, that you can take everyday things you can talk about. Cosby was, you can talk about your life, make it autobiographical. I think that was the biggest change I made after years. Was I because of the political correctness, I was getting pushback on certain topics that I was talking about. So I decided to make everything first person and autobiographical. Carlin was just a brilliant wordsmith. His ability to use the language, and I started studying. I was probably 7 or 8 years deep into comedy before I realized I was a moron. I was an idiot. I heard a comic talking about capitalists, and he called them swines. And I didn't know what a capitalist was. And I'm driving home. I was working in New York, Catch a Rising Star. And I'm driving home that night to Jersey. I realized I'm an idiot. I make my living with words, and I probably had a 200-word vocabulary, and most of it was foul. So I went home and looked up the word capitalist. I didn't see anything wrong with that. So I didn't understand why they were considered swine, but that's that's a different issue. But I decided to start educating myself. I bought a ACT study guide, and I started studying words from the ACT. I figured, those are college words, so I might as well start there. And then from that on, every time I read a book, I'd look up words. And young comics, I always tell the same thing: read. Just read everything you can get your grubby little fingers on, from magazines to pop culture to classic books, because those will become your reference points. And again, you make your living with words. We have a wonderful language if people are willing to use it. And paint pictures with, and that's your canvas. If you're a storyteller, there's other people that just like to do, da 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 punchline, da 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 punchline. Stephen Wright, da 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 punchline. But anyway, I big advocate, and Brian Regan is the same reason. Wolfberg, brilliant wordsmiths, and I've kind of migrated towards those people. And clean.
So I did want to touch on the clean. So when you were going through your rehabilitation, you had alcoholism, you were battling it, you decided to switch and go clean. How hard was that transition, and what was that start like?
It's interesting. In hindsight, I believe it was God's hand on me, but it was probably a couple years after that I committed to my faith. But it was more of as a father than anything else. We got called to school. My fourth grade son called his teacher an F&B. It's an interesting conversation to have. It's as a parent, and I told the teacher straight up, I wasn't going to lie to her. I said, boy, I'd love to tell you, I have no idea where that child heard that kind of language, but he's been in and out of nightclubs, and he's heard it come out of my mouth. It's funny. One day Cosby said something about Dice Clay when Dice Clay was on top. He says, what's he going to show his kids? You can't show an 8-year-old, 7-year-old, 6-year-old that kind of stuff. So when they ask what you do for a living, it was hypocritical of me to look my son in the eye, even in fourth grade, and go, you can't talk that way. That's the way adults talk. So I just decided to pay them 25 cents for every bad word they heard come out of my mouth. And then it kind of transitioned into the stage where I thought, you know what, I don't want to be that way on stage and not that way at home. I'd rather lead by example. That was my point to my children. So it was even years later, I remember when they were teenagers and they were sitting backstage at a comedy club one night, and everybody was telling dirty jokes, but I wasn't. So when we got in the car, I said, I just want to point something out about what you just watched. I said, I was able to hang with all the boys and not slip into the vernacular, the language. I didn't need to use the language to be one of the guys. So that's not an excuse for you if I hear you using that kind of language.
Good teaching.
And they did tell me, they said, we did notice that. And I guess they were fine till my oldest went into the Army. Then he came back cussing like an Army boy. So
that always fascinated me. Some comics that you see that are clean, it's another level of dimension to the comedy, because it's not just, oh, it's clean, but it's like, I feel like it hits harder at home because everybody can.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. With the word edge, people say, well, you're not edgy, but I don't agree that language determines edge. Content determines edge. I get I'm not edgy. I mean, Cosby's not edgy. But to me, edge came, the word, what it meant to me as a comic was there was a line in society of mores, and comics used to walk up to the line. They got to the edge of the line, and some people stepped over it, some people kicked it. And it'll be interesting to see going forward with all of the taboo subjects and the cancel culture that we live in. I don't wade into that pond because I never did. I tried social commentary early in the 90s, and I was bad at it. All I was a loudmouth with an opinion. I didn't really have a lot of funny stuff to go with it. I'd watch the news, and I'd come back with a point of view or something, and it was never funny, and my wife finally sat me down and said, stop it. Nobody cares what you have to say. So I'm not in that pond, but there's a lot of comics that are, and there seems to be no rules to who gets canceled or not canceled, and how far back do they go into the archives of your career to find things that were socially acceptable. And all of a sudden, 8 years later, you didn't get the memo that,
Okay.
that this can ruin your career. So it'll be interesting to see. I think Ricky Gervais threw down the gauntlet at the award show when he came out and trashed Hollywood for their hypocrisy. I thought, great, one of their own finally stepped out and took a risk. I think this decade of comedy, it could possibly be the best decade of comedy since the 70s, because the 70s were coming out of the more moral fiber of the 60s, where the edge line was distinct. And guys like Carlin and Pryor, they just obliterated the line. It was edgy. It was just stuff you never heard before in public. I mean, I remember listening to old Red Fox albums at my friend's house, which were filthy. And when their parents would leave the house, we would just grab the LP and throw it on and listen to Red Fox. But Red Fox was on the Chitlin circuit. He was on the black circuit. You know, he wasn't mainstream yet, until Sanford and Son. Yeah, Pryor came out, and Carlin. I wanted to be Richard Pryor. You know, there was a point where I was doing so much cocaine that I had that Pryor sniff. You know, I would mimic him. And I was able to get away with it because I'm a white suburban kid, so nobody picked up on the fact that I was doing a black guy, you know, if I was doing a bad impression. So, yeah, I think that the next 10 years will be interesting to see if we recede back into like the 1960s, where they started handcuffing people and throwing, like Lenny Bruce, they would handcuff and throw into jail. Mm-hmm. For things he said on stage. We're close. I think we're really close. It's sad. It's sad to see. But hopefully they'll bust out, and the comics will lead the way. They will.
I'd agree with you, because when I was growing up, a lot of the comics I liked were a little edgier, more racial based. Like I remember Chris Rock was probably one of the first specials ever, the Apollo, and I was just like, I couldn't stop laughing. And then I got into the Pryor, Red Fox. I still love Garland. You know what? Sam Kinison too. I don't give him as much love as I should, but just the stuff they were talking about. Even Dice. Dice wasn't always my favorite, but I could get why he appealed, just the way he said. So, I think it's gonna go back to like the '90s comedy, the early 2000s, but we'll see about that.
Well, I hope the freedom is there. That's all. I mean, the topics will be, 2020. I hope the freedom to speak your mind comes back. I put my own parameters on me, and then as I came to my faith, I stuck within certain boundaries. I write material that I just look at and go, that's funny, but I can't do it. Again, I put my own restrictions on, and it helped me because I got to be a better storyteller because of it. I'm hoping that that society just finally just says enough is enough. It's a small amount of people in comparison to 330 million people, but they certainly have a loud voice and a lot of power, it seems.
So speaking of these topics, the America I Grew Up In tour that you're about to embark on due to the whole COVID thing.
I hope, from your lips to God's ears, I hope I get back out there.
You will. Things are opening up. It'll be all right. People want to go out and have a good time, but you said you had that idea is when you were going to take your grandkid to the park, and your daughter-in-law I think she wanted her to use the car seat.
I didn't have a car seat, and I said it's no big deal. It was like a 5-minute drive. Anyway, that's when that was the genesis of the whole thing. I started kind of looking into all the rules, and my wife and I were talking about it over dinner, where we said if we raised our kids today the way we raised them 40 years ago or 30 years ago, we would lose custody. We know that. We might not go to jail, but we would lose custody. We let them play in the street. We let them do, So anyway, that was the genesis of it. Things were different.
So out of this generation, what pet peeves would you have that maybe haven't been instilled on you? Like you said, you guys didn't lose them, but it was like, you know what, that's extremely stupid. Why is this even a rule now?
Well, the whole trophy thing. As a matter of fact, I just wrote a line the other day that said, because a lot of millennials are coming out to my shows, so I just want to tell them that we greased the skids. Our generation greased the skids so that you guys could have a trophy at everything. I don't know why our generation chose to do that, but we did. And that's the thing that bothers me more than anything. When my kid came home, they didn't win one Little League game and he had a trophy. And I go, you didn't win one game. He goes, yeah, but and that's when why? I don't even, my head could not even process that. Trophies were for people who actually excelled at something. So
looking at the schedule here, the 29th in Fort Worth, Texas, Oklahoma in June 30th, and Dallas in July, one right after another. We all know you're itching to get back on the road. I was wondering what tour life has been like for you. Because I know a lot of rock stars, they always say like touring is not easy, not just being away from your family and the mental movement that's going on, but the actual physical touring takes a toll out of you.
Well, it does. That's one of the reasons why 4 years ago I started a workout program.
Okay.
And I'm pretty diligent. At least 5 days a week I work out. I work out hard because I didn't want to die on the road. It depletes you. But when I'm in the middle of like a 3-week run, being home is awkward. I always call it wash, rinse, repeat. Go to the airport at 6, 7 in the morning, fly somewhere, get there about 1, take a nap, work out, go to the show, come back, go to bed, get up at 6, 7 in the morning, go to the airport, fly somewhere. It's wash, rinse, repeat. And when you're in that, after so many years, this was hard, this Corona thing. Tammy pointed out to me after 30 days, she goes, this is the first time you've been home 30 consecutive days in our entire marriage. We've been married 34 years. I said, I've done 30 days. She goes, no. She goes, you never have been home an entire month in our marriage. And now I've been home three months. And I kind of like it, but I'm itching. I did a show May 30th for a place up here in Tennessee at a theater in Tennessee. There was 100 people. They were all separated 8 feet apart or whatever. I don't know. And I just was so jacked, man. I'm telling you, I came home, my adrenaline, and I crashed. I don't know if you've ever been juiced, but the next day is like, I was drained. I spent the whole day just walking around like a zombie because the adrenaline from the one show. And I told my wife, I go, I love what I do. I absolutely love what I do. You'd have to do it for 42 years,
Again, I'm still marveling at that 42 years. Even after the struggles, I still hear the comment you made about the bartenders, like, hey dude, you're still not good at this. Like, I don't know what you're gonna do. But with the touring, you guys, like you said, you haven't been with her consecutively for 30 days. And tours can be really hard on marriages. Like just the epic lifestyle. How have you guys overcome that? Like, what's the schedule for you guys? Like, you show up, hey, hon, I'm here. Do you keep up? Or is it like, hey, just hit me up once a day. Just let me know you're okay. How have you guys worked that with your marriage?
When we were getting a divorce years ago, it was over the fact that I was gone. I was getting audited by the IRS, and I looked down. He says, how many days you're on the road? I saw it on my tax form. It's 228 days. It hit me like a freight train. No wonder she's leaving me. I'm gone 230 days a year. And I wasn't making any money. We were struggling financially. So you had the stress of all of that. She's raising 2 kids pretty much by herself. So when we decided to keep our marriage intact, the goal was to work less, make more. And I didn't know how to do that. But that by then I had come to my faith. So I got on my knees and I basically said to the Creator, if this is what you want me to do with my life and you want me to stay married to this woman, you're going to have to find a way for me to do this and stay married. So I'm gone maybe 100 days now, and we're busy. I might now that the tour is really caught on, I might kick it up to 125, which is still half of what it was at my peak. But she said to me back when it was 200 plus days, she goes, I knew when I married a comic that you'd be gone a lot. I just didn't know how much. So I told her we cut our lifestyle. We cut our bills in half. We just sell our house. We don't drive such nice cars. And, I don't have to be gone so much. We both like our time together. We like our time alone as well. Probably 2 weeks ago, we were having problems. And she just basically sat me down and said, "You're not paying attention to me." I go, "I'm not." She goes, "No." I mean, most men put their head down and just do what's in front of them. So I told her years ago, if you're not going to tell me that we're having problems, we're going to have problems, because I don't pay that much attention to, until all of a sudden, she's throwing things at me. You go, "Now, what's your problem?" So anyway, I married God gave me a wonderful woman that'll at least sit me down and tell me, pay attention to me. And that's not a problem. I don't have a problem at all paying attention to my wife. I mean, I really don't. But I get sidetracked with other things. I like to read. I'm in the process of reading about racial things in America, and reading White Guilt now by Shelby Steele, and reading Thomas Sowell, and all that. Kind of get caught up on, I grew up in the 60s in Chicago, so I saw the first round, and it was not pleasant. I don't know what this one will be, but I at least want to be educated enough to sit with people and try to understand where they're coming from.
And discuss it. I think
Yeah.
because of the timing, we're so fortunate to have already seen a phase of it. So now we kind of have a grip of how to deal with what's happening now. But not to change that from that subject, but
Yeah.
we always talk about your wife. How did you meet her? When did you guys actually meet? And then when did you know it's like, okay, this is the one? I got to pop a question.
She was a waitress at a comedy club, and I heard her laughing in the back of the room. She was a smoker, couldn't get her breath. She was gasping for air, and to a comic, when you can't get oxygen in your lungs, it's music. So anyway, I sought her out afterwards, and she was just stunning, just stunning. And she had a 2-year-old boy. She was a single mom, and I was living in LA. I was 29 or 30, coming to 30, up on my 30th birthday. Really was just a mess. I had a mattress on a floor in LA. I didn't have a checking account, struggling, alcohol, drugs.
Mhm.
In other words, I was quite the catch, is what I'm trying to tell you. Yeah, I was the catch. So who wouldn't want to marry me? Anyway, we only dated on and off from November to April. I asked her to marry me in April. We got married in July, and she got pregnant in May, of course, so why not add to the stress and all that? We moved to Boston because they had the hottest comedy scene, and I didn't have to travel so much living in Boston. Yeah, 34 years later, we're still there.
So, but that sounds so quick. Like there's just so much more. Like that connection was pretty tight right there. You moved, was it 85 you guys moved to Boston, sir?
We got married in 86, so 86. We
Eight-
met in 85.
Okay. You made a statement. You said being in a marriage will draw out your sin. When you said that, did you mean draw out the sin for you to notice as a person or just in general?
Well, the kids, I think, will expose your sin more so maybe than the wife. But I think the wife drew out my anger. That's what I told my boys on their wedding day. We had a conversation. I sat them down and I said, when they were little, I was extremely angry.
Mm.
So a lot of that is inside them that they don't even remember. I mean, because I asked them, "Do you remember some of the things?" Throwing fits, and I was working on myself, but I would still explode and things. So I said, somewhere inside you is this anger and rage. So it's going to come out. Your wife will draw it out of you, and you're going to look at yourself, and it's going to be unbecoming. I hope you don't embrace it and justify it. But if you want to talk when you're done, and I think but the boys, like with the foul language, my children exposed that. You start seeing in them things that are unbecoming, and you realize that those are your traits coming out. I was pretty negative when they were little, how bad luck, what kind of bad luck we have. And all of a sudden I started hearing them at 9, 10, 11 years old going, "Oh, we got bad luck. And it was just one of those things that just triggered me. Like my father was just so negative growing up, just awful, just awful. I just inherited it. And it took me a long time to get that voice out of my head. Really did. But I think it's the kids that I think will draw out, and you'll see it like a mirror. You'll either change it, or you'll just, like a lot of fathers, just go, he's just like me. Well, I didn't want him to be just like me.
So when did she actually become Christian?
Well, that's a good question. Boy,
Was there struggle with that? Because I know I'm skipping around, but you were trying to find yourself. You wanted purpose in your life, and then you went
Yeah.
clean. For me personally, I felt like that's when things really got super hard for you, because you had the show in Jersey. You're trying to be clean. They pretty much booed you off stage. Ladies drunk out of her mind yelling at you.
Oh, the college, yeah.
You're still trying to do good by your family, trying to get your life together. You owe all this money to the IRS, and it just seems like, okay, he's tried self-help, he's tried rehab, he's tried Buddhism, he's trying all these things, and now he's got this Christianity. Like, was she
Right.
kind of looking at you weird, like, really this one out of all that? Or was it kind of just like, okay,
Well, her first question was, what does that mean?
okay.
And I told her, I'm not sure, but I said, I'm to love you as Christ loved the church. And you're going to have to dig deep inside yourself to tell me how that's a bad thing for you and the kids. And she said, what does that mean? I said, that I can tell you, he gave his life for the church, for us, for our body. He broke his so that we can heal. And I started taking the kids to church. She stayed home. She asked a couple of tough questions, if our children right now, they were 8 and 5 or 9 and 5, I don't know. They were young. And she said, so if they die tomorrow in a car crash, they go to hell? It's a tough question. And I said, I don't know. Heaven and hell are not my domain. I said, all I know is that inside something's different. I know that existentially. I know of all the things I tried, Buddhism and New Age, all of this stuff, this was different. And I knew it. There was something different about me. And I think she saw the change. It's a funny story. I tell it on stage sometimes. People ask, when did you know? Our car broke down. We had a 1988 Oldsmobile, but it had a bad intake valve. I don't know if you know what that is, but it would take forever to get up to 40 miles an hour. I mean, and people honk at us, flip us off. They hated us. We'd leave a red light, and it would take minutes to get up to 35, 40 miles an hour. Anyway, it broke down, and usually when a car broke down or something bad happened, that's when I would go into a self-pitying tirade and break things. And everybody braced themselves for my fit. And I don't know, this calm came over me. I turned around and told my oldest boy, hey, I saw a gas station back there, about a mile or so back. Let's go for a walk. And Tammy looked at me and said, that's it? And I looked at her and I said, I don't know why, but it just hit me. Mechanics pray to God too. It's not the road to Damascus that Paul had, but when I read the verse that Jesus said, don't worry about this life, I will send a counselor in the form of the Holy Spirit. You'll have a counselor inside you, a new counselor. It's not the old one. As I was walking, it just dawned on me. I go, that must be what the Holy Spirit is. That little voice inside of us, the new conscience. I'd like to say I listen to it all the time. I don't. But that day, I think that was the kind of stuff she saw that was different in me. And gradually, she just started coming to church. And she was raised in the church, but she was raised by people who abused her. These were church-going people that abused their daughter. So why wouldn't you turn your back on it?
Yeah, I could see that too.
Yeah.
When you accepted, or at least for the people that don't know about Christianity, it's like a profession of faith that Jesus Christ is Lord.
Right.
There are some cases where a person, like say somebody who's addicted to drugs or etc., they've been doing it for so much time, they have such joy, relief. It's like you said, when you get off stage, it's just an adrenaline that shoots through you.
Right.
The coming to God experience, they're crying, they're so joyful. And then you have other Christians who they accept Jesus into their life, and it's kind of a slower
Right.
progression. It's not as like, it's like, okay, I'm
Right.
calm. What was that for you? And when you finally knew, like, okay, this is it, like, how did you start piecing your life together? Because I know you said, you got on your knees. It's like, God, if you want this to work, you gotta have to help me out. Were you apprehensive? Like, oh, I don't know if this will work, or it's more, we'll take it day by day. We'll see what happens.
No, I was all in. Something changed. It was after an 8-year, like I said, I was New Age, Buddhism. I loved Ayn Rand. If I wasn't a Christian, I'd be an objectivist. I'd be her, Ayn Rand. I loved her philosophy. I still read it. I just finished an article she wrote. It was apropos. She wrote an article after the Woodstock, a month before Woodstock, I believe, was Apollo 11.
Mm.
So we had all the looting and rioting at the same time the space launch was going on down just recently. And I remembered the article. It was, I don't know if it was a talk she gave or an op-ed she wrote. But anyway, I looked at it, I found it online and I reread it. And I told Tammy, I said, it's an interesting perspective. So when I started studying the Bible, the first book I started studying was Ecclesiastes. And if your listeners are not familiar with Ecclesiastes, if I was king of the world and I could make an executive order, you know, I would require every incoming freshman in high school to study for a semester the entire book of Ecclesiastes. And then every outgoing senior would have to do a review of it. Mm-hmm. Because Solomon knew more about life in a materialistic society than any of the self-help books and all these gurus that I read. That book was so powerful. When it starts out meaningless, meaningless, all in life is meaningless. That was kind of my conclusions after 7 or 8 years, looking for what the world had to offer me as a solution to the meaning and purpose question. And because I knew it wasn't going to be money, and I knew it wasn't going to be a nicer car or a bigger, I knew it in my core, as if God put that in me that said, okay, I'm going to give you one truth and you're going to hang on to that. And that's the truth it's going to be. You're never going to make enough money. You're never going to have enough square footage. So when I heard meaningless, meaningless, and that was in the Bible, I thought, well, that's true. I know that. And then basically the end of the sermon was, with life without God will have no meaning. Without meaning in your life, there's no purpose. Without purpose, suicide. And that was kind of the conclusions that I had come to on my own. Mm. So to have that as the first sermon I ever listened to, I don't think it was a coincidence. You know, had the first sermon I listened to been on Genesis 1, you know, creation, you know, I was an evolutionist guy. I still think that evolution was a process. The existential part of the crisis that was in me, it was salved. The wound was salved when I heard that. And I was so jacked because Tammy had left, took the kids. So I was left alone with all these Bible tapes. Man, I just soaked it in. So by the time I made a commitment to go, you know, my commitment was, if you are not who you claim to be, Jesus made some claims. If you are not who you claim to be, then Solomon was right. Suicide. I'm done. This has to be true. So I clung to it like a life raft for a long time. I want it to be true. But like everything else I studied, I did the same thing. I wanted New Age to be true. I wanted Buddhism to be true. I wanted it to be something that I could derive meaning from. Well, the lens changed the more I studied the Bible and realized that if you begin every day with, it's his universe, not yours, that means the entire creation belongs to him. And it begins with humanity. Every human being you meet is a creation from a divine being. So when I found myself disparaging other human beings, as was my South Side of Chicago nature, I went back to the verse in James where James talks about the human tongue is like a rudder on a ship. It's a small part of a large vessel, but you can't steer the ship without the rudder. And when you bless God out of one side of your mouth and you curse his creation out of the other side, you're being duplicitous and you're not steering the ship properly. It changed the way I talk about people. It changed the way I look at people. Again, it fights my nature. My nature is, to be snotty and not so nice.
I went to a Christian college in PA, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I was fortunate enough. I had a very good professor. He taught us the wisdom books, and Ecclesiastes, as long as Proverbs, were one of my favorite books. And yeah. Ecclesiastes, I think for me, struck home because, yeah, it's pretty negative book, but it also gave me like, okay, if everything's like, there's no point, why would I not try anyway? I have a twisted thinking, but one thing I found interesting was, I believe you were 14 when your father sat you to the side and said that there was God. Now, my personal experience, my mother's Christian, my dad's atheist. My dad is a very smart individual. You talk
Right.
anything you speak about, he can hold an intelligent conversation with it. You name a language, he can at least say a couple words. You know, so he's a very smart guy, thinks everything through, and that was his conclusion. So when I was growing up, I got both sides of the
Right.
party.
Good for you, though. Yeah.
I got lucky. That's what I'm gonna say. I got lucky because I could have skewed one way or the other. But I have an open mind to science. You know, I believe like, okay, well, if there was a Big Bang, God did it that way somehow. And then when I got older, I pieced, oh, there's two separate thoughts. But I always remembered the things my father told me specifically when it came to real life situations. Like the biggest thing I think he ever told me was, if you read something out of the Bible, read it as if it was a guy writing it, and then why would he write it that way? And then I translated that, okay, why would God tell us to write it that way? It's got to be from a human
Right.
perspective as well as godly.
Yeah, I look at it as divinely inspired, right?
But there's always that influence of my father in the
Right.
background. Even though I'm 100% Christian, I love challenging my faith. I love challenging.
I do too. I was a huge Ravi Zacharias fan because Ravi explained things in a way that I can understand it. Read a lot of apologetics, and Ravi, I always went back to him because it was understandable. He wasn't writing for the academics. He was writing for the layman. I love that. It's funny. My wife said to me, she goes, why do you even, because Tammy, once she made her commitment, that's it. You know? So, and I'm one of those, I'm a skeptic at heart, always have been. I was an atheist for years. So, by the way, you said something about Ayn Rand.
So we'll get to that. I didn't even get to ask my other question, but we definitely have one for you on that one.
Okay.
That one was one of my favorite questions to come up with. But when your dad told you that, do you think that had an effect on why it was so hard for you to find that peace before you found Christianity? Because you have other stories like the lady at the comedy club trying to say like, God told us we'll see you again in heaven.
Right.
Or the guy at your,
yeah, there were seeds.
what was it, the college dorm? No, it wasn't the dorm. It was class. A guy was doing his testimony and you leaving.
Man, you did your homework.
I tried to. I'm not the best student. But do you think your dad pulling you to the side made that really like, okay, accepting this is harder or finding peace is harder? Like that and just the nature of being like him too?
Yeah, I don't know. My dad, it's interesting about my father. You know, I've always said he was raised by pastors. His dad was a pastor. So he was raised by Christians. So his moral foundation, his ethical foundation was Christian. And I think that he was a fair man. I remember it was hard to get close to my father for me. I was intimidated by him. But I remember sitting him down near the end of I wanted to thank him when I was raising my boys because he disciplined fairly. My father was a fair disciplinarian, and he taught me to be fair with my boys. I thanked him for that. I looked for something positive. He was a hard man. He was I always wondered if he got abused at church. He had such a visceral reaction to anything Christian. And I always wondered, one of his friends tried to hug him once and my dad almost punched him in the face. I mean, you couldn't touch my father. You couldn't. I tried to hug him once later in life and he put his arms at his side. So, I mean, he couldn't even put his arms around his own son, you know. And I remember asking my sister once, I go, did you ever sit in Dad's lap? You know, watch TV? I mean, she started thinking about it. She goes, you know, no, never did. Which makes you think that he was violated at some point because it's just not normal. How do you not pick your kids up and
And Jake the Snake
slobber all
that too.
Yeah, you know.
Wrestling fan. I always found it interesting because my dad, he again just knows everything. Just one of those really blessed guys, but just the idea of something greater, it's just doesn't seem specific to him, even though we're both Star Trek fans. But question, your father also may have gotten the first, what was it, a road rage incident? Did he ever get a picture?
Yes, he did.
He got the picture of the Falcon. People don't know. You can explain it, but I was really questioning whether or not he was ever able to get it and paint it. So
that's a good. I don't know. My sister delivered. You know what? I think tonight when I hang up here, I'm gonna take a picture of one of the pictures I have that my dad painted of one of his. He was a jazz musician. My dad.
Okay.
It was a huge Louis Armstrong fan, and my dad drew a picture of Louis Armstrong. I got it up in my living room. I got a stack of pictures that my dad painted, and I've never really gone through them. Painted one of me, and I got it in my office. and the Louis Armstrong one. But I wonder if he ever did paint the Falcon. I don't know. I know he used to love going deep into these small towns in Arizona and taking pictures of these weathered Native Americans, these guys that are like in their 80s, just they got lines on lines on lines, and he'd paint pictures of these interesting faces that he loved. But yeah, it's a good question. I'll have to check and see.
So quick for the crowd, his dad actually was a painter, and he fell in love with his mom, but that wasn't a respectable, I want to say, profession. So he got a job in construction. I didn't know he was a jazz musician. That gets me happy because I know you could play guitar.
Well, he was invited. He could have went to Juilliard on GI Bill when he got out of the Army. He played the horn in the Army. That's what, and it bothered him because he wanted to be a paratrooper. He wanted to be a 82nd Airborne Special Forces guy, and he was such a good musician that his commanding officer. This is the story. Again, I don't want to, it's funny when everybody was jumping all over Liz Warren for talking about being Native American. I mean, I got stories from my father, or not from my father, from people that knew my father didn't talk about this stuff. But I remember him playing the horn up until the mid 60s. He would take his horn to work with his tool bag. He carried his saxophone and clarinet. Mm-hmm. And he'd play the jazz clubs on the south side of Chicago, the black clubs. And then the social unrest hit. And I don't know what year it was. It was probably 66 or 7, because 68 it all exploded. I don't know. He went into a club that he was playing pretty regularly, and the owner of the club walked over and said, "Jack, I can't protect you anymore." So anyway, I think a part of my father died. And then he had his upper teeth pulled, and I guess, I don't know, I don't play the horn, but I guess he couldn't bite down hard enough to get it to work, so he stopped playing the horn. Took up guitar. My brother played guitar. My brother was a brilliant guitarist. Yeah, I just stayed away from music because there was such a contention between my brother. My brother was classically trained, and he played rock and roll, which my father hated, So he said, he goes, "You got all this gift and you play 3 chords."
And that's what gets people's attention, man. I'm a big rock kid, heavy metal, stuff I probably should not be listening to as a Christian.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I remember, well, me and a friend went to go see Slayer. We were in line. It was me, a couple of Catholics, a Jewish guy, a Muslim guy. Of course, everybody else there's just like having a great time. But we were talking. I was like, "Yeah, man, remember that song? Jesus Saves? Oh, that was so funny. Isn't he Catholic?" Yeah. But I wanted to go back to Anne Ryan. I'm saying her name wrong. I'm sorry. But her book, Atlas Shrugged, was a big influence on a game I played growing up. These video games, the one I played became a classic. It's called BioShock. It's basically, a guy in this game, he rejects all societies. He doesn't like America's concepts. He doesn't like Russia's concepts. And he's like, "You know what? I don't like anybody's beliefs. I'm going to build a city underwater, and we're going to have our own society." And a lot of the concepts he drew from, a lot of the creators of the game drew from Atlas Shrugged.
Oh, wow.
And I always thought that was cool. And the fact that you like her writing so much, I wanted to know, what was some of the focus points in that book that you really like? Like, if you were to mention it, just Atlas Shrugged, it's one of the things you just automatically bring up. And for the people that don't know, what is capitalism to you, or at least in general?
It's the markets. It's somebody creating a product from scratch, from their mind, creating something and bringing it to market. Laissez-faire capitalism, which was she was for, I'm not necessarily for that, because I believe there has to be some kind of regulatory system, but minimal as possible. Yeah, just creating a product, bringing it to market, whether it's an agricultural thing where you grow corn, but it's yours, you own it. The society doesn't belong to it. That was the big message in her book, the collectivist versus the individual. If you read it, it's prophetic today. We're there now. I mean, we have so many government agencies. It's like, even with healthcare, I've gotten into so much trouble with friends of mine where, I said, we're not arguing about healthcare. We're arguing about who pays for it. We have healthcare. And the question then becomes, do you own the doctor? Does the state own the doctor? Because the doctor is forced by the state to give his services for what they deem is fair. Whereas the capitalist says the market will deem what is fair, and the doctor owns his mind and he owns his abilities. That's the thread throughout the book. Her example was steel. This guy came up with a new way to make steel. It was lighter and stronger. And then the government came in and said, "We own this. You have to give it to the people." And he said, "Oh, basically over my dead body." And he took it. It's a 1,200-page book or 1,100-page book, and I just chopped it to shreds. It's interesting. When I was living in Arizona, I just finished Atlas Shrugged, and then I was starting to study the Bible probably a year after that. And then Arizona Republic did a review of the readers on the most influential books in their life, and the Bible was the first book, and Atlas Shrugged was number 2.
I can't wait to go through that one. That's one that's always been on the list, but I haven't gotten to it. I'm reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius right now.
Oh, wow.
I believe that's a Western kind of Ecclesiastes, just a little bit more positive in the thinking. At least that's what I got from it.
I've never read it, so I can't tell you about it. I may put it on my list after White Guilt.
You know what? If you really want to read a good book on this particular subject at the time, Malcolm X's autobiography.
Yeah, but it's interesting you say that. My wife brought up Malcolm X because we watched, was it Muhammad Ali?
With Will Smith?
Will Smith, yeah. Okay, yeah, I'll read that. I will. I promise you that.
You know what is beautiful about it? His ability to control the English language. His mastery over it. I won't spoil anything else other than, but I guarantee you'll enjoy that. So
charismatic leaders are always gifted with the language. Always.
Before you even became Christian, you knew a guy. He was rich. He was opening for you, and why? You have all this money, so you wanted to learn from him. Like, how did you get your wealth, etc. I have no idea what this gentleman's name is. I'm looking at my notes now. I'm trying to figure out even if I was able to find his first name. I think his name was Phil, but I was always curious, who was that individual that you had to talk with when you first, like, hey man, did you ever try God? Because every story again, you're golfing with him. He said something profound, and he was like, well, you got to know the creator. What? Did you get that? Bible? Oh, no. Moving on. Hey, that was smart. Where'd you get that? Bible? Again with this Bible. What was that man's name? Who was that?
Bill Glasgow. He's my financial guy now.
That is a wild.
He started with a company called Prime America, and now he for years he's had his own financial company. I went through 3 different business managers before, because I was always a little apprehensive because he's a good friend. How comfortable would he be telling me to stop spending? I wanted somebody that was going to be basically my father and just go, you can't, because I spend. If I didn't have people telling me to save, I wouldn't save. So anyway, he sat me down. He said, I'll be as tough as you want me to be. So he's already 3 years now. I probably had 2 really hard conversations with me. And fortunately, because I would have not been able to get through these 3 months had it not been for him. Money wasn't the issue. It was just, I want to get back to work. Right. I could probably handle another 4 or 5 months, and then I get stressed. Then I'll get stressed. We've been friends for 20 plus years now.
So what was that phone call like? Like, hey, bro, I'm part of the team now.
Well, I called him. I asked him, would you be willing to? I didn't have the assets. His company, you have to have minimum number, hundreds of thousands of dollars in assets for him to handle your assets. I told him I'm not even close. But because of our relationship, he said, I'll do this as a ministry for you. We tried the Dave Ramsey thing. We tried, and I'm getting to the age where now it's like, I got probably 7 or 8 more earning years. I'm done. So I needed to make some changes. So he lost his fortune, opened a theater up. Again, you talk to people who open restaurants up. Again, this is capitalism. He jumped into the marketplace, which is what always bothers me when people see successful people and they go, we want what you have. You owe it to us. I go, yeah, you weren't there for the 6 or 7 that failed, and you weren't there, doling out your money to cover the losses that he lost millions. Anyway, started from the bottom at this Prime America and worked his way back up. And it's impressive. So I said, if you can do for me what you did for yourself, I'd appreciate it.
You guys are resilient. That's just amazing. Question, hard subject. Your wife did get cancer. She survived it.
Yes.
that's one of those things where that's a low blow to anybody spiritually. Just the gut, your stomach, your world just kind of you crumble. I wanted to know what that process was like in your faith, because I have a very good friend, a very good pastor. I play basketball at his church all the time. I asked him the same question. He had the same dilemma, and he's full throttle. God's in control no matter what happens. Not easy, you know, but that was pretty much his answer. And that's not always the answer everybody has. So I was wondering what your experience, and I couldn't say the word. I was wondering what your experience was like with that, and then your faith as well.
It was interesting to me. We got deeper into it. Um, it was interesting because it was probably 2 months into her treatment where Tammy said to me one day, she goes, maybe this is why God kept us together, was for this moment, you know. She goes, I can't imagine doing this alone without you. But there was a moment of clarity for me that was really, my career had been really starting to escalate. The trajectory was going up again finally. And then Tammy got cancer. And my sanctuary when I'm stressed is to go out and hit golf balls. I can stand on the range and hit golf balls for hours. And, you know, I can put the headphones in, I can listen to music, or I can listen to a book on tape. It's just the process of just hitting golf balls that you know, relaxes me. I was hitting balls one day and getting angrier and angrier. I remember sitting on a bench and saying, show me my heart. What is going on here? What is going on? Because I didn't want to go home like this.
Mm.
And that little voice, you know, that new conscience says, you're angry because your wife has cancer and it's interfering with your career. And I was so devastated by how selfish that is. But that's in, you know, it's in my heart. And that was truth. It was the truth. If I was to be honest, that was it. I was being selfish about, this is really inconvenient for me. You know, again, you know, at least you can deal with truth. You know, it doesn't have to be that way. One, becoming aware of it was really cool. It was like, okay, I can deal with this. I need to just go home and be a better helper for her, you know. And it's amazing. I learned that in AA. One of my best sponsors I ever had said to me, I said, you know, I can't go home because I'm so angry or whatever. He goes, get some trash bags. And I go, for what? He goes, whenever you feel like drinking or you ever get like where you're full of rage or hate or whatever, go out and pick up trash. And I go, why would I do that? And he goes, because it works. And I go, I'm not, you know. Anyway, I ended up buying 50 trash bags and threw them in my front seat. And one day I was just white knuckling. Yeah, I don't know. You ever been enraged behind the wheel of a car? And I pulled into a mini mart and I just started picking up trash. And he said the hard part is to not let anybody see you doing it, because your pride will kick in and you'll think you're doing something really special. But it works. It works. When you get out of yourself and help another, or just do something for some other form of service, whatever, it takes you out of yourself and that selfish pride. And so anyway, we got deeper into our prayer life. We got deeper into our faith. One of Tammy's friends said to her, a non-believer, said, I don't know how you can believe in a God that would allow cancer. And she said, I don't know how I could get through this without him. You're not looking for, you know, our prayers weren't cure this. Our prayers were give us peace in the middle of this storm. That's all. Don't let it cripple us to the point where we can't be parents to our kids. And I can't do my job. I had to still get on stage and make people laugh. So that was our prayer. Just comfort us in this storm. You know, your will be done. I never looked at it as fatal. And then one night, a bunch of people laid hands on her, and she went to bed that night, and she sat in bed and said to me, Jeff, this is going to sound weird, but I felt his presence when they were praying over me. And I said, that doesn't sound weird. She said, Jeff, I know this is not going to be fatal. I know it.
That's great.
Yeah. Again, you know, you take it one day at a time, and you do your treatments and everything. And that's 20 20 years ago now. So,
and I think I'm amazed now. You know, I don't do too many interviews with our brothers and sisters. You know, I kind of just keep
oh,
it straight. But you know, you hear things like, okay, you know, that little voice in your head. I'm a person that overthinks everything. So when
right,
it tells me something, I'm like, you gotta make it clear. I can't mess this
right.
up.
I always, I always used to say it'd be great if Jesus spoke to me in a Spanish accent. At least I know it was him.
But I've my decision to go to the college I went to, my decision not to go to Spain. Let me tell you, after this interview, my man, I've dodged some bullets. So super grateful. You know, the feeling being touched by God.
Yeah,
Important things that a lot of people hear and they're like, unless you've experienced it, you really
right.
can't get it.
Well, that's the thing, and it's you know, the best example I heard. Someone could say to me, "What do you love about your wife?" And I could tell you, she's beautiful, she's intelligent, she's centered. My God, she's centered. She's never irrational. She's a great mom. She's a great wife. You know, but these are all tangible things.
Mm.
So the response to that would be, I can find a prettier woman. I can find a smarter woman. So she go down the whole list of all of these tangible things. And then you know, would you drop your wife to go with the new one that has better qualities of those qualities?
Mm.
And I go, no. And they go, why not? Because it's those existential things that I can't explain to you that bond us, that draw me to her, that makes her different than any of the other 3 billion women on the planet. Because if it was just simple lust, we would have been done years ago.
Mm-hmm.
There's these things that I can't give to you. I can't explain it to you. But that's the relationship with Christ. I can't explain it to you. You know, explain to me Jesus. Well, I can't. There are things that I know in here that bond me to him and the Holy Spirit, whatever it is. It's intangible. It's no different than, you know, you walk into a dark room. You feel somebody's presence. You can't see him. You can't taste him. You can't touch him. You can't smell him. You can't. But there's this presence. There's this presence here, and I can tell you. I remember saying to somebody, I was about 6 months into this whole walk, and I don't know why, but prayer works. I said to some guy, I don't know why, but every time I pray, I get comfort from that. And he goes, because there's a God. I mean, it was that simple. I mean, it was like, I wanted to complicate it, but he said, because there's a God.
That's
Okay.
that's not close, but the simplicity of it. I don't know if you
Right.
Steve Harvey, but he does
Oh,
these
yeah.
skits,
Yeah.
write it down, believe. It's not that complicated. It'll take time, but you know, it's
Right.
it's encouraging. I want to get back to the America I Grew Up in tour.
Great.
You have so many great bits, especially the closet vision with your wife. Every man, every son, every guy has had that moment where the missus,
Yeah.
she's starting to get ready, she does the shower, she comes out and then walks in, there's nothing to wear. And there's that struck a chord with me, thousands of dresses and shoes.
Right.
So you have this thing where you don't do the dice routine where the crowd responds back with the joke and finishes it, but you have such good jokes that even if you have to, you could repeat them over and over and over and over again. It could be every special for the rest of your life. Even if the crowd's
Oh,
hurt, it's still going to be funny. So
well, thank you.
what about this particular set do you feel differs from the others past? What did you try and do different for this one, sir?
Well, I'm still working on the America I grew up in. I'm
Okay.
trying to add to that. I mean, in the whole show, the hour and a half, some nights I do an hour and a half, maybe 20 minutes of it is talking about, you know, BB gun fights and, you know, shooting our index fingers and things like that, you know. But, you know, it's funny when you're talking about the closet vision, it just kind of hit me. I go, that's Ecclesiastes. That's, got all this stuff and I got nothing. You know, I got nothing. You know, so, but this tour, I'm having a blast on it because people are sending me things through Facebook You know, one guy sent me, he goes, yeah, when I was 8 years old, my grandfather took me to the liquor store and explained to the guy, the cashier, the guy behind the counter, this is my grandson. He'll be buying my booze and he'll be buying my cigarettes. And he said he used to just drive his bike. 8 years old, he'd drive down to the liquor store, pick up his grandpa's pint and a pack of Cools. And I remember those days. I remember my dad used to send me up to buy his cigarettes.
Another joke you had, you were speeding in a Focus and the cop stopped you. And he's like, you're making a ploy on, like, why do they ask us?
Right, the chit chat, the small talk. Yeah, you know, just write the ticket. Let's get on with it. Obviously, I was in a hurry.
So was that actually happen to you? Like, could you tell us?
Well, they always ask me. I've had maybe 4 speeding tickets, because I was such a drunk and I drove a lot drunk. I used to use the cruise control all the time, so I knew I wasn't speeding. So I used the cruise control all the time. Now I rarely speed, and but I got caught 4 or 5 times in my life, and they always ask, you know, are you aware of how fast you were going? Well, yeah, I got a speedometer right in front of me. I mean, you know, these are things you want to say. You know, the only thing I was unaware of was where you were sitting. I mean, honestly, I would have slowed down. I'm not a glutton for punishment. Then the whole math thing, that was one of my favorite, because the story problem. I started thinking one day, how fast do I got to go to make up the 10 minutes that we've just spent writing this ticket? And then I realized, you know, those are the story problems that everybody said, when am I going to ever use this in my real life? You know, train A leaves. So anyway, I'd go, oh, let's see, I got 10 minutes to make up. I got 22 miles. I got to be there in 14 minutes. And I got, you know, so I got to do 147 miles an hour to make up this 10 minutes.
Right now, I've heard that joke, but I'm still laughing. So that's what I mean. Like, just
Oh, great. Thanks.
There's so many jokes, but do you think you could narrow down which ones you're most proud of, or at least 1, 2 that, you know what, they might not be my best joke, but when I say it, you know, I get a little pride. I get pride from that.
Well, I'll tell you one that never really works that I love. Burning the couch on the front lawn. When we were looking for directions, we saw this family burning their couch on the front lawn. It's like they had never seen fire before. The family was sitting there with their mouths agape, staring at the flames coming off. So I wheeled my spare tire up to the guy and said, to the father, and said, look, wheel. It's one of my favorite jokes, fire wheel. And it rarely gets a laugh from collectively. There's 4 or 5 people that laugh, but and my wife even said to me, she goes, why do you keep doing that? Because I like it. I only tell the story of the burning couch to do the fire wheel reference. You know? So
to know you did that in real life, that just makes it so much better. Because
that's true.
I got a couple friends, they're funny dudes, but you can tell when they're exaggerating parts, and then it was like, okay, that's neat. So to know that actually happened, like, hey, you performed for Sam's Club, Hobby Lobby, but a quote from Steve Mason, that's the vice president of operations at Chick-fil-A, said this: over the years, I've had the opportunity to work with many excellent entertainment professionals during our annual meeting, and this was by far our most positive experience. I cannot adequately express how much I enjoyed Jeff Allen's performance after our awards presentation. Who do you feel has given you the best compliment as an entertainer? Because that's a pretty good one right there, but who's somebody that said, like, hey, that was amazing, and then you were like, whoa.
I'll tell you, I love it when people, you know, after shows now, it's taken me all this time to get to the point where I could draw my own audience to a venue.
Mm-hmm.
So to stand out in the lobby and shake hands and take pictures with people, those are the greatest compliments. Because to get in your car, spend your money, drive, whatever. I had somebody that saw me in San Antonio, flew from Detroit down to San Antonio because he missed me in Detroit. We spent the whole weekend, but he said, you were the reason we left. And then I had some people from Jersey flew to Vegas. They normally go to Vegas. He said, we normally go in January. I was there in November, so I don't know, whatever it was. But they saw that I was in Vegas and they hopped the plane. Those are the greatest compliments I could have, believe me. I've been working for that for a long time.
Was there any idol, like comedic idol, or somebody like maybe famous, not famous, but somebody you knew of that you wanted to meet, and because of your profession, You were able to not. You don't even have to have had to say hi, but you're in their presence. You're in the same room as them.
Glen Beck. I was a huge fan of Glen Beck. I go back to when he was just starting out in the talk radio business, and he was hysterical. He was very funny. Most people don't know that. I mean, he got painted into this corner as a cartoon character by people, but he's an amazing, gifted radio personality. He was trying to make a point. There was I don't know if you remember Terry Schiavo.
Yeah.
But yeah, her husband wanted to pull the plug on her. Her parents wanted her to live, and she was in a vegetative state. That became a court case in Florida. Well, Beck felt that the parents should be allowed to take her home and love on her as long as they wanted. And the court sided with the husband where they pulled the plug. So Beck wanted to make a point. So he started this thing where he had a book come out, and he says, if my listeners and if you don't make my book #1 on Amazon in the next 2 weeks, I'm going to kill this dog. And he'd have this puppy, and you'd hear the puppy, being a puppy. People were calling with all this hate, how dare you, you disgusting, vile human being, blah, blah, blah. You're going to kill a dog because you have a stupid book and blah, blah, blah. He ran it out for 2 weeks, and I kept listening to try to figure out what the punchline was. I didn't know what it was. Turned out to be, he goes, listen to all this for a dog, yet there's a human being down in Florida whose parents want her home. They're ready to kill her, pull the plug. And that's when he won me over. I thought, because I was laughing. I knew he wasn't going to kill the dog. And I remember at one point he said, we have 16 million listeners. If you'll all send me a penny, I can buy a Maybach. When the opportunity came to work with him and meet him, and then it turned out to be one of the nicest human beings I'd ever met, that was a plus. I was worried about, you're always worried about meeting people that you respect in the industry, because you don't know what kind of human beings they're going to be. There's always the public persona and then the private persona. I've always tried to keep the two as close together as I can. Anyway, he was just a gentle, kind human being. And I was so glad when I left his office. And I called Tammy. I said, man, it was just the coolest thing. Again, what they painted him as is not even close.
Yeah.
It's sad.
I will give you that. It is so fortunate to meet somebody that you look up to, had an importance in your life, or even not. Like I remember meeting Billy Corgan, and he's had he's a musician. I don't know if you know that today, but people painted him as like, it's hit or miss with him. He's not always the nicest guy. Out of all the people, when I was an intern at the radio station I used to work at, he was probably the smoothest, most mellow. Didn't seem like he was on anything. So, he seemed pretty good. You can tell, like, oh, somebody had a good smoke today or something. But he just came in, had a show, and then just popped in, did his stories. It was just, that was so super pleasant. That was great. Meeting my other idol. I've been super fortunate in this position that I'm in, especially meeting you too. So, remember you mentioning you did a show. I want to say it was in Nashville, and Gary Chapman hosted.
Yes, and Sam's place.
That was the show where it kind of started off the uphill travel, I'm sorry, for your career to really explode to what it is now. And I think it was 1,500 people, 15,000.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It was 50. The praise gathering was 15,000. I think the Ryman, whatever that seats, it was packed out. I opened for James Brown at the Ryman.
Whoa!
That was fun, and I got to watch his opening 20 minutes. He was probably 73 years old at the time, I think. It was the hottest opening 20 minutes I'd ever seen live in my life. It was church. It was people were stomping. It was amazing. And at 20 minutes, he goes to the microphone and he said, I couldn't understand. He goes, whatever he said. He leaves the stage and some kid comes out and starts doing a magic trick, the torn and restored newspaper. And all the air in that room went out, man. People were looking at each other. Where the heck did this come from? Are you kidding me? It was awful. And I'm talking to my manager, and we were up in the balcony, and I'm talking to my manager, and I said, that has to be the kid that scored the weed. And the deal was, I get to do my magic trick. I'll get you your weed, but I get to do the magic trick. Because that's the only, there was no rhyme or reason for this kid to be up there. There was none. I mean, he was killing. He was killing. People stomping. I mean, sweating. People in the audience were sweating. And just, anyway, I left 5 minutes. He came back out. I left after 5 minutes. I said, nah, I wasn't the same after that.
So what about, because you guys talked about the introduction he gave you back at the venue. What about was so special? Because they said it was like the first time you ever got an introduction like that.
Yeah, well, it's hard for a comic to follow a good introduction, but he said something along the lines of, it's a kiss of death to build an audience up for a comedian to tell him he's funny. You know, usually we don't deliver, you know, but he felt that he wasn't causing any problem. You know, I don't know how to, again, I think we had it on the website for a while, but he's a friend of mine. Matter of fact, I'm going to call him when I get done with you. I'm going to call him tonight. I think tomorrow night. He goes live every Thursday night on Facebook with Shonda Pierce, and I think I'm going to crash the party tomorrow.
Okay. Well, I know you have to go. There's 2 more questions for you. 1, favorite verse,
Right.
And then 2, what is the best piece of advice someone has given you that readily comes to mind? I've gotten everything from don't rent a tour bus. I've gotten things profound. You know, just live. I can't mention what Doyle von Frankenstein told me, but that was very profound too. It was great. So what's not something you tell people, but something someone told you that just kind of, I'm always going to remember that. That's good wisdom. So.
Oh, okay. Well, you wanted my favorite verse. Be slow to anger, quick to listen, slow to anger. Mm. And along with that is, I've always said, God gave us 2 ears, so we're supposed to, and 1 mouth, so we're supposed to listen twice as much as we speak. I've always liked, and I told my boys this constantly growing up, think. Always think before doing. So that when someone comes to you and goes, why would you do that? You know, you have an answer. Because it used to drive me nuts. I'd ask my boys, why'd you do that? And they go, I don't know. I go, well, then don't do that until you know why you're doing it. So think. And it sounds trite, but I really believe in our culture today, there's not a lot of thought going on. There's not a lot. And I try to research. If I hear something that's counter to anything that I think I know or believe, I try to hear the other point of view and then go, okay. You know, I heard a great interview once. Dennis Miller interviewed an activist. I don't know who it was. I don't remember the name. But anyway, Dennis asked one question. The guy talked for about 10 minutes. And Dennis said, wow, there's not one thing you said I agree with. But, hey, it was nice chatting with you. And he didn't interrupt him. Didn't call him an idiot. Didn't call him stupid. Didn't, you know, no ad hominem attacks. Just said, wow, I don't agree with a lot. And none of that, you know. But anyway. It's nice having you on. And I thought, wow, that'd be nice to be able to get information that way. I left it up to the listeners to hear it and go, oh, you know, maybe there's a point of view there that I hadn't thought about. But yeah, in this day and age, people are quick to react without a lot of thought. Think before doing.
All right. So thank you so much for your time. I can't tell you how much of a pure joy it was. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Jeff Allen. He's currently about to embark on the America I Grew Up in tour, sorry. He'll be starting it off June 29th in Fort Worth, and he'll be going all the way through October. Dates include Buffalo, New York, Albany as well. Closest to me, which I'm definitely going to try and see you, is Grand Opera House, Wilmington, Delaware. That is July 11th.
Oh, man, that's great. You got to come up and say hello.
I definitely will. Or the Performing Arts Center in Hanover, PA. You can go online and check them out. Awesome. Check out Jeff Allen on Facebook, Instagram, Parler, and a slew of other outlets. Jeff Allen. Sir, before you go, can I get an ID from you?
Hey, everybody, this is Jeff Allen, and you are listening to John the Ninja.